All right, here we are. Round 3 is done. Round 4 is getting set up. We have standings. Let's look at how things are going. Who is winning? What are they winning with is maybe the better question. We have 11 players who are 3-0. Tiebreakers are what they are, but really all these players are tied with each other. So what do we see? We see a lot of different decks. We see 2 human decks are 3-0.
And 2 Azorius control decks are 3-0.
Okay. Well, we have not seen that yet on camera. In addition to that, we have Jessica Agro, Samuel Gravener, who we saw. We have a Boros Burn deck. We have an Amulet Titan deck, who is the deck list we actually looked at, Nigel Hagley. Mardu midrange.
We have not seen this strong player.
Joseph Schuster's Pox deck is winning. Mm-hmm. And then we have a Tron deck. And a Grixis Death Shadow. Death Shadow is a deck where, I mean, there are several decks where within an archetype you see multiple different builds.
Oh,
Death
yeah.
Shadow, a great example of that.
Mm-hmm. We didn't get to see. I did from the deck list. There was a Grixis Death Shadow deck that was playing a copy of Kroxa. It was only one copy, but I was still excited to see it in there. I think it fits very well, especially the whole escape mechanic fits very well in the Grixis Death Shadow shell. So I was excited to see that, and maybe our friend on Grixis Death Shadow is actually playing some very spicy newer cards, which would be exciting to see.
Yeah, that's a lot of vowels on the name. I'm gonna say it's Lakad Matatog.
Okay, that sounds
something
like what I would go with.
Something like that. So congratulations to him for being 3-0 along with the rest of these players. And so we're coming back to us as we get the match set up. And this round, if we get a chance, we're going to start looking at our player histories. We can look at how a player has progressed to the point they're in the tournament so far. So we can see what they've played against, how things have played out. So we're going to be watching Ryan Marvin versus David Goldfarb. So if we have those slides ready to go, let's go ahead and bring up the first one. If we don't
yet.
Okay.
But we have looked at David Goldfarb's list. We were just talking about a Mardu Pyromancer list before we came back from this break. And so we have taken a bit of a look at David Goldfarb's deck, and I am very excited that we are getting a chance to actually see it play out. We're getting to see new cards like Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, as well as Magmatic Channeler, which I highlighted as being one of my favorite cards to have been relatively within the last few years. And it's very cool to see it kind of slide into the shell of a modern deck. And let's take a look at what they've played against.
So David Goldfarb on Mardu midrange, the young Pyromancer deck, has defeated Dredge, Izzet Blitz, and Selesnya Heliod. So certainly a variety of decks there. Mm-hmm. And only dropped 1 game so far against the Selesnya Heliod deck. I could see, one at some point something slips through and your opponent gains infinite life and you're just stuck.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Justice Wright would not have to actually go through the trouble of killing David Goldfarb. He'd just say, I'm at 6,700, good luck. But against Boros Burn this round for David Goldfarb, he has played against an aggressive deck, but not necessarily a burn deck. And then for Ryan Marvin, Golgari Midrange, Selesnya combo, and Rakdos Death's Shadow. So Rakdos Death's Shadow and Mardu Midrange probably share a decent number of ideas, even though the Death Shadow creatures are going to be bigger and the Mardu deck will be wider. I don't know that I'd even want to say who I think was ahead of the match. I'm going to say the burn deck is a little bit ahead because
I would agree with you.
Yeah. The ability to pick off some things like young Pyromancer before they get out of hand is going to be valuable. So the deck lists are ready. Let's go ahead and see Ryan Marvin playing burn. This looks pretty traditional.
Stock. I don't even think I see anything in the sideboard that looks extremely new. Maybe playing a few more copies of Path to Exile or Core Firewalker than we're used to, but could be hedging for the mirror just a little bit. Expecting a lot of other people to be bringing burn. For the most part, this looks pretty stock. And we kind of were talking about this at the start of the stream, but if some people maybe missed it, playing an aggressively slanted, especially a deck that you're comfortable with, I feel like most people who play Modern have at least played burn or played against a lot of burn. So you kind of understand how the deck plays, and it could be just like a little bit of a comfort pick for a lot of people. And that could be the case for Ryan Marvin. Maybe it isn't. Either way, doing pretty well with it and is slated to go up against this Mardu Pyromancer deck. And we both think that at least in game one, we didn't take a super close look at the Mardu Pyromancer sideboard, but we will in just a moment. I do think that we're probably slated to do pretty well. And now getting to look more closely at the sideboard for the Mardu Pyromancer deck, the Kaya's Guiles in this matchup actually could end up being quite a bit of an impactful piece of tools in this matchup.
Yeah, so one thing, there's the Mardu Pyromancer, the white portion with, like, if this was black-red Pyromancer, sure. The existence of Stoneforge Mystic and Batterskull does make me feel like maybe this isn't quite so burn-favored as I might have thought, as if that ever gets going, that's going to be a real problem. And in the deck list, we see that Ryan has his Skullcracks in the sideboard. So if Batterskull ever gets going, and the life gain is not going to be stopped, and that's probably, I mean, if that connects one time, that's usually enough to turn the outcome of the game in favor of the Stoneforge deck. So
we're going to hope that those main deck things are good enough, because it doesn't look like there's actually a lot in the sideboard of the Mardu Pyromancer deck to handle a lot of the burn things. We're not playing any copies of the Escalade spell with 1 and a black that I all of a sudden can't remember the name of.
Collective Brutality.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we see now you're probably geeking out over this alternate Lightning Bolt art.
Yes and no. If I didn't see the way that MTGO specifically handles the way that it still has the text over it, I personally dislike. If it was in paper, I might like it a bit more. But there is a lightning bolt with a bear on it. I personally would have preferred that one. I go by Beky Bear. Kind of like bears. We're going to leave it at that.
All right. So Inquisition comes in here, and there certainly are some choices. I imagine Lava Spike is not going to be taken. So we're choosing from a Swift Spirit, Lightning Bolt, or an Eidolon. And the choice is Lightning Bolt to give protection for now. So yeah, it's something like a Stoneforge Mystic or a Pyromancer is going to survive when it hits the board, and that could spell some trouble for Mr. Ryan Marvin as he gets his damage going here. He certainly has the ability to push a lot of damage.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Question of that.
Ooh.
And there is the Stoneforge.
And I imagine that is going to be the card of the last 5 minutes would probably be more accurate. Batterskull indeed going into the revealed cards zone and into the hand of David Goldfarb.
And a burn spell is drawn, a creature burn spell, which is crucial
to get rid of the Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of stinks. Your opponent, trades up on you. They're just getting a free Batterskull in hand, but I don't know that you really have a choice here. Okay, I like this. This makes sense. Give your opponent the chance to block, and then you can Lightning Helix them instead, and you pick up a damage at no risk to yourself. So
certainly a heads-up play, taking the moment to maybe do a little bit of breathing, do your plays in the most optimal sequencing possible, and we see the burn player taking the moment to do so.
Okay, so Thoughtseize coming back. Now this is probably, I mean, Ryan's cards are all kind of
redundant,
interchangeable.
Except for this Eidolon of the Great Rebel, I feel.
Sure, but David taking 2 life and not contributing, or at least not spending all his mana contributing to the board, Ryan would probably take that trade. So whatever is picked off here it's probably fine. I expect it'll be one of the creatures.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I imagine the Eidolon of the Great... Oh, all right. It looks like David has decided that the Monastery Swift Spear and the damage plus prowess that would happen in the next turn is much scarier than the possibility of this Eidolon of the Great Rebel coming down.
Land here, probably not a bad draw, as it allows I imagine we'll see Lava Spike and then Eidolon following it up, and this is going to be tough for David. Okay, right. That is very significant.
nicely timed lightning bolt coming onto the Monastery Swiftspear, so we will not be able to get that extra damage in. Kind of a shame that the card that we drew we are immediately playing, so we are kind of playing open-handed, and there are 4 cards in the hand of David Goldfarb, but we did miss a land drop on our last turn and this turn.
Yeah, and Dark Confidant. Do you attack into this Dark Confidant?
I don't really know, actually. 4 is a low enough life total that I think the Eidolon of the Great Rebel living, as well as the Dark Confidant trigger, are big enough things that we, just let it sit on the field.
I agree. There's 2. Both players have a creature that negatively impacts David Goldfarb's life total. So I am happy as Ryan Marvin to just stick with that arrangement. And yeah, David contemplating tapping mana there, but whatever he's casting, if the Dark Confidant flips a spell, then it might be. I'm surprised to see the Summit Canyon not draw a card at the end of the turn, but
yeah, as am I.
But the Secure the Critics drawn, and that will not quite do it.
You no longer can cast pretty much any of the spells in your deck, and hopefully the Dark Confidant kills you. And in fact, it does.
Yeah, so Kaya's Guile finishes things up through the Dark Confidant. So that's well, I mean, we saw Burn come out ahead, not with nothing really like smooth or fantastic happened. It was just pressure of damage. There was a little bit of removal, some missed land drops. So David wasn't able to develop quite as he would have liked, I would think. And yeah, that's more a lot of. I mean, this is no disrespect to the burn deck, but a lot of if your opponent stumbles, you can just finish them off quick, and that's what we saw there.
Yeah, especially missing 2 land drops, especially after getting a Batter Skull, which would have been a bigger impact, but missing any amount of land drops against a burn deck when you're trying to execute a game plan of your own and just keep yourself alive is never where you want to be. So
yeah,
probably kept the hand off of having the Stoneforge Mystic and just hoped to draw more lands, and it just didn't really shake up that way.
Yeah, and there was a discard spell too. I mean, the Lightning Helix had to come off the top, or the Batter Skull was in play, and that game goes very differently.
Oh, extremely. So the burn deck got a little bit lucky itself there for sure, especially after discarding the Lightning Bolt got discarded with the Inquisition of Kozilek. So
yeah. All right, so
was pretty lucky to get that Lightning Helix off the top. Yeah, let's take a look at the deck.
Back to the deck list again and see the sideboarding. So you, on first glance, weren't overly impressed on David's sideboard for this matchup. Let's take a moment here and look at it more carefully. And is your opinion changed? I think no. I think you were right the first time. Yeah.
You maybe are just bringing in these Angrath's Rampages, the Kai's Guiles. Maybe the Duresses are slightly better than Thoughtseizes because they don't hurt you, but that kind of feels really bad to be taking out a card with the same ability to put in a slightly different card. It maybe the Culligan's commands are worth doing because the 2 damage is able to kill pretty much all of the creatures on the opponent's side of the field. But I have a hard time imagining what comes out. Probably the Dark Confidants, probably the Thoughtseizes, and just trying to figure out what things are slightly better than those cards, if I had to guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely upgrade some stuff, even if we're not bringing in the goods.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see if David can handle things a little bit better. We see, okay, no creature this time for Ryan.
But certainly a lot of things to get rid of some creatures. Yeah. I imagine that this has to be a keep. It maybe is a little scary to keep, but...
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, you'd like to see a creature, but this is 15 damage in hand, and modern decks generally do a couple points of damage to themselves.
Especially a 3-color deck.
Yeah, so you really don't need to draw much. Yeah. As long as, well, if the creatures drawn are Dark Confidant, that's great. If the creature is Stoneforge Mystic and you have to use a burn spell, I guess you have 1 burn spell that you can spend for free on a creature in the Searing Blaze. You have to spend 2 burn spells on a creature, then you're kind of starting to lose on your clock.
So hopefully in the time that we are spent doing that, we are able to maybe draw a creature to deal the little bit of extra damage that we need.
So there's 1 point off, and David is at 19. Inquisition, I'm you go with Searing Blaze probably, right? We have
Yeah.
creatures in David's hand that he cares about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much all of these spells are also going to be able to take... Oh, looks like it's going to be the Lightning Bolt over the Searing Blaze. Possibly it's just saying that 1 mana is a little too efficient, and I don't want you to have such an easy time removing all my creatures.
Sure.
Oh, all right. The Thoughtseize stayed in, which I think is an interesting decision. Hopefully we'll be able to maybe see a few cards to know whether... what exactly came in out of David Goldfarb's sideboard, because now my interest is very piqued.
Skullcrack goes down. Okay, so maybe David isn't actually too concerned with his creatures if the Searing Blaze is being left. Now with the land drops exhausted for Ryan, the Searing Blaze is also much weaker until another land is drawn.
Exactly.
And David actually draws the Triome, so that's nice. And there's a Liliana, and this game is going to be nothing like the first one.
Not at all. This is kind of an interesting way for this to shake out. Liliana is going to be going up to 4. That's going to make her very difficult to remove off the field in any kind of efficient way unless we are able to draw a creature on the side of the burn deck. We do see the Searing Blaze being discarded to Liliana, Croxa of Death's Titan of Death's Hunger for David Goldfarb. This is kind of an interesting way for this to shake out, but we do see the burn deck continuing to put pressure onto David's life total with these burn spells.
Yeah, this is rough, though. I mean, okay, sure, Lava Spike allows the Lava Spike and the Skewer, but if you do that, I guess you're losing Skullcrack anyway. And then...
you're empty-handed and hoping that your opponent doesn't resolve anything too scary?
I mean, but the burn deck can win off of an empty hand, just drawing a couple of spells. I mean, that's all it takes, really. Liliana of the Veil Ultimate actually is not really very threatening here. And Ryan chooses not to go with the burn spells.
An interesting decision, perhaps putting some importance on holding onto the Skullcrack.
Yeah, that's possible. I feel like it doesn't really necessarily get better.
I am inclined to agree.
A discard spell here would be bad now because the Lava Spike is not able to be cast.
And it looks like we are escaping Croxa from the graveyard.
Okay, well, that's a clock. That's a card out of hand. Whichever it is. So we ended up losing. So if the 2 burn spells had been played main phase, then this Croxa would have bolted Ryan. I think that would have probably been a preferable outcome as opposed to just...
yeah, that would also put David at 4 life right now.
Ryan would prefer both players to be at a lower life total, I think. Now Ryan's going to be the lower life total because his Crocs is just going to start bashing. And the Liliana, I mean, I suppose there are enough 2-mana spells in Ryan's deck that Liliana ultimating to knock out 1 land is something?
That's certainly a little bit of something. This is an interesting play to see the Searing Blaze go to dealing 1 damage to Croxa, 1 damage to face. I suppose that puts David down to 6, which is very important for drawing just bolt spell, but certainly not the case. We haven't seen a lot of lands. They had to be somewhere. This is
it. So this is lethal on the board, with 6 and 2 on the board plus the Croxa Bolt, and that's 11. So we are going to game 3. That Liliana did. I mean, you got knocked a few cards out of hand. This game, it was the burn deck that was a little short on mana, although I think it probably had what it needed. It was just a matter of it couldn't unload all of its spells before the discard spells, reduced its capabilities. We said the opening hand could do 15 damage. I don't think all those spells actually were able to be cast before they were knocked out, and that was all it took. I expected the Mardu deck to win off the face of creatures, and that was not what happened. I mean,
not at all. Well, Croxa did quite a bit of work,
but that's not what I had in mind.
No, I agree, and certainly not the escape side of Croxa. I would expect it to be maybe cast for the front part very quickly, maybe just get rid of a card, but did not really expect it to be escaped. And be doing 9 damage a turn.
We can jump over again as the players are getting ready for game 3. Yeah, and it's no shock that it came into play, and then the Liliana certainly accelerated the buildup of cards in the graveyard, which is nice, because usually the way you put cards in the graveyard is with fetch lands, and that's not ideal against that deck. Now we talked about how the Mardu Pyromancer at the end of last round deck, one-shot graveyard hate not so great there. The Rest in Peace Leyline of the Void somewhat better because it does disrupt some of what it's got going on.
Yeah.
Sure, we had Core Firewalkers come in.
Yeah.
We saw Skullcracks.
So those came in.
Rest in Peace very possibly didn't come in, but
I imagine after that game you have to, right?
I don't hate having one. I don't know if I want. I would never want to draw 2, but maybe you even do. There's also Lingering Souls, which is a card that you're particularly worried about in the matchup, I suppose. But there is justification to bring it in. But is it better than a random bolt? I don't know.
Hard to say. I mean, in that matchup, if you had been able to cast Rest in Peace on the second turn and just not have to ever deal with Croxa, I think we might have been in a fine space. So it just depends on. It could also come down to Ryan Marvin deciding what is more important on the play versus the draw, which I think is very important. On the play, maybe you just want to be entirely slanted towards aggression and just not really care what your opponent's game plan is. Whereas on the draw, that could have been a different thought process, though, of course, we didn't see the Rest in Pieces in the deck.
Yeah. Okay, so here we are, game 3, and kind of the signature card of the deck, Goblin Guide, is in the opening hand for the first time for Ryan Marvin, who is on the play, and we're going to kick things off with a couple damage getting through and a creature on the board, which we did not have last game.
True. So this Goblin Guide probably going to be able to bridge some amount of damage, revealing a Seasoned Pyromancer that is now in the hand of David Goldfarb.
David did take a mulligan this game, but it's a deck that could reasonably expect to be able to recover from a mulligan. Certainly out of the 2 decks, it probably handles mulligans better than the burn deck does.
I would say so.
on the average mulligan, it's just like 2 damage that's just not in your hand. And there's no way to get it back, really.
The Mardu deck I would certainly describe as slightly more resilient than the burn deck. Sometimes aggressive decks can be a little bit volatile, and if you end up getting a little bit behind, it just really all starts to fall apart, kind of like we saw in the last game. But this hand looking a lot better for the burn players should this Goblin Guide be able to stay in play for any amount of time. Yeah,
I mean, it's really just a matter of it being, it could be bolted, but there's nothing's going to block it on the next turn, so it's going to likely get in for at least 4. And even if it forces a fetch to shock to deal with it, that's still an indirect.
Still another bolt.
Damage. Yeah. And with 12 damage sitting in the hand, it looks like one of the players has asked the other to wait for a second. But with 12 damage in hand, if Goblin Guy gets in, once more, and then over the course of a few turns, a burn spell is drawn, we're close to the end.
What do you think is the optimal play for the Mardu Pyromancer deck to have this turn going into the next turn?
I think it's a removal spell for the Goblin Guide that does require a shock.
A fetch shock, but it is certainly feeling like that might be the only option here.
Yeah, there's a Fatal Push. I mean, that would do it. But yeah.
It's always scary if you're playing a 3-color deck to search for one basic, though, but you kind of have to against burn sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, we know there's a Seasoned Pyromancer in hand, so we're going to need 2 red sources, but how much damage can we reasonably expect to take from this Goblin Guide and still win the game? I think if it hits 3 times, that's rough. So
definitely agree. Yeah, it looks like we're still taking a little bit of time, but as we just discussed, this Marsh Flats certainly gonna not make the decisions for David Goldfarb very easy.
Yeah, one thing, if there is, we could also go with no play and get the Triome in play right off the bat. I suppose if we're not bolting, if we're not removing the Goblin Guide, that's the play that we're gonna have happen here. If there's a discard spell, I don't know if there's even any need to prioritize it on turn 1, because on turn 1 or turn 3, it's going to hit the same thing.
All right, very tense as we're going into these next few draw steps. Since these decks are very fast, it is likely that a lot of the tempo of the game is decided within these first few turns. And again, whether this Goblin Guide is able to connect, especially this turn, and if it, as Joe and I have said, we basically believe the game is over if the Goblin Guide is able to connect a third time.
Okay, so that time it hits a Blackwater Cliffs, which is a land that will not lead to any pain, so that is good. Now, you can either play 2 burn spells or you can play Eidolon. I would play the Eidolon, even though it looks like it's locking me into 8 damage done to myself. I'm just not worried about that here. And I want to push all the damage I can on my opponent.
Yeah, and you're both at 17, so it could be a little scary. Okay, thankfully, we have a Fatal Push. So we're slightly in the realm of favored, as we were just talking about what would be the best case scenario. Not letting this Goblin Guide connect even a second time, and just going to go ahead and Fatal Push it. But now this Eidolon of the Great Revel is going to come into play. But that is going to put Ryan Marvin's life total at a little bit of a possibly scary situation as well.
One minor thing here, if the Eidolon is played pre-combat, then either David takes 2 extra damage or doesn't draw the free land. So assuming Ryan was going to play the Eidolon either way, that potentially could have been done. Now, if he was going to potentially play the bolts, if the turn had played out differently, then totally reasonable to do it the way that he did. So, moving into the next turn, Angrass Rampage takes out the Eidolon. And David, even though it seems like he's holding his own, I mean, he's traded off for the creatures as best as he could, there is lethal damage in hand.
Yeah, that's certainly true. So we probably have to find a way to, gain some life. All right, that helps a little bit.
Yeah. So this now puts Ryan as total potential damage of the hand is no longer lethal. It's 9, and David's 11, so he's 2 points shy, or a shock land or 2 fetch land. Oh, okay. Well,
all right.
This is significant. So we talked about. So the Inquisition was available on turn 1, and the choice was made to take down the Goblin Guide and hold the Inquisitions for later because they'd likely do the same, and that does turn out to be correct. So Boros Charm drawn, 4 damage, but that's 10 total in hand.
Yeah, not 1 shy, enough. So we better not fetch.
Right.
This is the scary point where 11 feels like a decent amount, or a rather high-ish life total. But a lot of 3 spells in the hands of Burn can just equal that amount. So your decision-making in this matchup does have to be extremely meticulous.
David does know a couple of the cards. I believe he knows the 2 on the left, Lava Spike and Skewer the Critics. Caesar Pyromancer comes down, pitches Croxa and another Pyromancer, and a Mountain is played. So the Croaks actually can come back. So if
we did see the Croxa do some good things for David Goldfarb.
This would be a poor turn to draw this would be a poor turn to draw a spell. A land would have been ideal there because we're not going to be able to play all of our spells before the Croxa comes in.
What do you think the chances are that you just Lava Spike Skewer this turn and just hope to draw the last piece of Burn?
I think that is what should happen here. If the Eidolon comes, the Eidolon can block the tokens, so Eidolon coming into play, Croxa being cast would then put David at 5. One of the bolts would put him at, so it's really the same.
It is amusing to see David say in the chat, wow, this is coming down to a top deck. It's even though he doesn't really know everything that is in the hand of Ryan, he knows just how stressful this moment is.
And this is the way a lot of Burn games are going to go, where it's just, okay, I did what I could, and now you're at, in this case, 1, and hopefully that's enough.
But if we look at this damage that's about to happen, this Croxa is going to discard this Eidolon. We're going to swing for 4, put Ryan to 9, and then we also have lethal damage next turn.
Right.
If it goes the way that last game goes and Ryan just draws a land, this is going to go the way of David, and David is at 1 against Burn.
Yeah, yeah. So we have one draw and then a redraw. If it's a land, we can redraw. Oh, that doesn't work.
Smash to Smithereens came into this deck?
Oh, well. There's 10 damage on the board without the Crucible. Maybe David will play an artifact pre-combat. Maybe he'll play an equipment. That's Ryan's only.
I suppose that is what the Smithereens are in there for, yes. But I think that that's a bit of a heartbreaker.
So that will do it. And David Goldfarb's Mardu Pyromancer will advance to 4-0. There were not too many bricks in there, probably. A creature at least could have blocked the Kroxa and bought a turn. An untapped land would have allowed the Horizon land to the Sunbaked Canopy to draw into potentially a 1-mana burn spell. Yeah.
That was a stressful game. If you're either one of those players, you're sweating. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And that's because you put yourself in the position the best you could and didn't quite get there.
But good games to both players.
Something like minor decisions there that impacted the game. The playing the Eidolon behind the Goblin Guide instead of before attacking maybe mattered. The Pyromancer deck only drawing one fetch land and winning the game at 1. So 2 fetch lands instead of 1 Azure land, maybe that's it. I don't know. Certainly there were things that could impact the game either way, and when it's the margins are that small, it doesn't take much to decide the game. Anyway, that is the end of that match, and we're going to step away. We'll be back in just a minute. Stick around.